instant feedback
Hello,
versus
my name is
delayed
Clayton
feedback
Bo Butler,
during
and my
cumulative
action
test
research
review. My name is Clayton Bo
is
Butler.
assessing the instant feedback versus delayed feedback
This research I
during
would perform
EOC review
with
in
4
secondary
chemistry teachers at Dorman High
education.
School. We would use college prep and advanced level classes. 60% of the students are minority students, 30%
So this
Black,
will be done with 4 chemistry
21% are
teachers
Hispanic,
at Dorman
5%
High
are
School.
2 or more races,
College
and
prep and
4%
advanced level
are Asian.
classes will
In the
participate.
pilot program,
Dorman High School
the
is
rising
60%
6th grade
minority
female
students,
at
30%
McCracken Middle
Black,
School
21%
was my daughter.
Hispanic.
She's not
5%
identified as gifted academically in any
with
area,
2 or more
though
races,
as
and
a
4%
5th grader, she
Asian.
did achieve all A's, is very social and athletic.
The questions will be
The questions
answering are:
this
do
research
students learn
aims to
more
answer
when they are
do
receiving
students
instant
learn
feedback
more
by
when
computer,
they are
or when
receiving
they
instant
check their
feedback
answers
by
using paper
computer,
materials
or when they
and a
check
paper
their
key
answers using
after they
paper and
finish?
pencil materials and a paper
Also,
key after they
do
finish?
students see more improvement on
Also,
their scores during a
do
2-day
students
review
have more content
if they use
retention for
computer-based
cumulative assessments if
with
they use
instant feedback
computer-based
instead of
assessment
the paper review
with
materials?
instant feedback instead of the paper and pencil
Lastly,
review
do students
materials?
complete more
Lastly,
review
do
activities
students complete review activities to mastery faster
if they
if they
use
use computer-based assessments
with
instant feedback instead of the paper and
paper
pencil review items?
materials?
The literature on these subjects
So what does the literature
analyze
already
several
say?
different
Well, let's
comparisons.
look
One
at
is paper versus computer-based assessments. Switching
to
to
computer-based
CBAs, or computer-based assessments, I'll use CBA
can
from
be
this point on,
stressful to students
can be
and
stressful to
teachers.
students and teachers.
Though
It is found,
Dimbitzer et al.
though
noted
Dimbitzer and all
computer-based
noted that
assessment
CBA
increases
format increases the efficiency of scoring and
administering a test.
administering the test. Integration of CBA has become more accepted and preferred by students and educators in relation to receiving the feedback and using the time
as noted by
efficiently.
Dubose.
However,
and
students
However,
use scratch paper less with
scratch
CBA.
paper
Chemistry
less
problems
with
typically
CBA,
do
and
require more
chemistry problems
calculating.
typically
Mason et
require
al.
some
pointed out that
calculating.
CBA reduces the
Mason
testing
et al.
time while
pointed out
increasing
that
teachers'
CBA
instructional
reduces
time.
the testing time
Teachers are
while
able to use the
increasing
extra
teachers'
instructional time to correct
instructional
student
time.
misconceptions
Teachers are
and move the
able
students
to
closer to
use that
mastery of the
extra
material.
instructional time to
Lastly,
correct
students
student
are able to work on
misconceptions
CBA
and
with a
move the
similar
students
amount of
closer to
brain power
mastery of the
as
material.
on paper tests.
Lastly, students are able to work on CBA
Some of the
with a similar
feedback
amount of brain
apps
power as on
research that's been
paper
noticed
tests,
is apps
as found
like
by
Kahoot or Quizzes
Pinskar
or
and
Google
Danielson.
Forms and Socrative. They
Next, in
allow for
their
instantaneous
literature
feedback
review,
to the
we
student
paid
after
attention to
answering
some
a
of
question.
the feedback apps.
Many teachers using these web
Feedback
apps,
apps, including
like Kahoot and Quizzes as a
Google
CBA
Forms,
to
and
enhance
Socrative,
motivation
allow for
and
instantaneous
engagement
feedback
and
to the
efficiency.
student after answering a
Additionally,
question.
beneficial
Many
is
teachers
the
are
fact that
using
these
web
formats
apps
allow
like Kahoot and
teachers
Quizzes
to
as a CBA
assess
to
whether
enhance
the
motivation,
learning objectives have been
engagement,
obtained.
and efficacy. As
Other
Masuka
research has
and
noted
Dottie
that
noted.
students formed a
Additionally
positive
beneficial
perception
is the
of the
fact that these
effectiveness
formats
of
allow
these
the
online
teacher
CBAs. Plus,
to
they found that
assess whether
students
the learning
appreciated the
objectives
instantaneous
have been
feedback
obtained.
provided
Lim et al.
within
noticed.
the online
Pinto and
resources.
Lorento et al. noticed that students
Instant
formed a
feedback
positive
and the
perception on the
LIT
effectiveness
has shown that one of the main
these online
capabilities of
CBAs.
CBA
Plus, they
is
found
the
that
fact
students
that they can give
appreciated the
immediate
instantaneous
feedback.
provided within
Feedback
the online
constructs
resources.
Scaffolding for students learning, especially online learning, becomes even more prevalent.
Next, we'll
It's
look
been
at
found
instant
that
feedback.
students
One of the
positively
main
viewed the feedback
capabilities of
process
CBA
and
includes
preferred
immediate
the feedback.
as noted in many articles.
It's also been noted
Feedback
that
constructs
feedback after
scaffolding for
wrong
students
answers
learning,
helps the
especially
student realize their
online
conceptual
learning, as online learning becomes more
misunderstanding. And also the
those in
positive
Lawley found
feedback
that
after
students
correct answers
positively
strengthens the
viewed the
student's
feedback
conceptual
process and
understanding.
preferred
Instant feedback mostly
Meyer et al.
increases the student's learning of the material and
that
motivates the
feedback
student
after wrong
to
answers helps the
continue
student
learning.
realize their
Since some
conceptual
students have a negative response to
understanding is
negative
misguided.
feedback, teachers
Also,
should
the
do some
positive
counseling on
after
feedback benefits
correct
prior
answers
to
strengthens
administering
the
the
student's
material with
conceptual
subject.
understanding. Instant
Finally,
feedback mostly increases
EOCs
the
or
student's learning of the
cumulative
material and motivates the
tests,
student to continue
final
learning.
tests.
Since some
EOC
students
tests
have a
do
negative
drive students
response to
towards a
negative
mastery of
feedback,
material
teachers
throughout the
should do some
classroom and
counseling on
benefits student
feedback benefits
performance on
prior
college
to
entrance
administering
exams has been
material
found.
with
Thus,
subject.
teachers do spend
Lastly, EOC.
extensive efforts in
EOC tests
maximizing the
drive
time of
students
students
towards
to
mastery
teach
of
the
material
standards
throughout the
within
classroom
their
and
subject
benefits
area
student
in order to
performance
prepare the
on
students
college
for their
entrance
next
exam.
educational or career step.
Thus, teachers spend extensive efforts in maximizing the time with students to teach
The planned intervention
standards
here
within
was
their
for students
subject area
in
order
one
to
class to
prepare
use a
students
paper
for their
key to
next
check
educational
their
or
60
career
plus
step.
review questions on the paper, while the other
So the
class will
planned
use instant
intervention is
feedback to
students in
grade
one
the
class
same
will use
review
a
questions
paper
on Socrative
key and
or the
review materials
computer-based
to check
assessment.
their
All students
60 plus
are going to
review
be required to
questions
retake the
on
review
their
questions
paper,
as many times as
while the
possible
other
in the 2
class will
review
use
days
instant feedback
for the
to
chemistry
grade
EOC.
same review
And
questions
all
on
students will take the
Socrative,
chemistry
which is a
EOC for
computer-based
their
assessment.
class
All students will
level.
be required to
Now, in the
retake the
pilot
review
intervention
questions as
program,
many
the
times
student
as
was
possible
given a
in the 2
CBA
review days
pre-test using
before the
Socrative
chemistry
for a
EOC.
unit of study
All
from
students
6th grade
will take
science
the chemistry
standards.
EOC
Researcher
for their
taught an
class
approximate
level.
45-minute lesson to the student and gave a 10 or 11 question multiple
Some of the data
choice
collected
review
will include the
quiz multiple
student's course
times,
grade up to the
randomized
EOC review
until
period,
the
their
student
initial
achieved
score
100%
on the
score,
review
which is
questions
what I will
day
call
1 and
mastery.
day 2, and
The
the number of
researcher taught a
times they completed
related
the review
45-minute
questions.
lesson to the student
Lastly, the chemistry
following that
EOC
and gave
score.
a comprehensive 22 or 23 question
Planning
multiple
timeline will
choice review
start on
quiz
August the 17th
multiple
and will
times,
go through
randomized each time
till
until
after January,
mastery.
due to the
The
fact that EOC
cumulative
will not be
post-test was given
taken
the
until the
next 2
18th and
days
19th of
without
December.
any feedback
January
during
the
it
2nd
or any
will be
future
an analysis
takes
time,
after
and the
it
6th
that
is
day.
when the writing assignment will be
And
completed. Thank you for your time. Any
the
questions?
first
Don't
quiz
hesitate to reach out.
was done with CBA given instantaneous feedback, and 2 weeks later a different set of lessons was taught given a delayed feedback using the paper and pencil quiz with the key accessible only at the end. So in the classroom, the data that will be gathered is the student's course grade up to the EOC review period, the initial score on the review questions on day 1 and on day 2, and their final achieved score on those days, and then also the number of times that they're completed the review questions, and the chemistry EOC score. Now, in the pilot, the pre-test score for each unit of study was collected. The quiz scores on the review questions for lesson 1 and lesson 2 for each unit, and the timing of the feedback that was given was noted. The amount of time and the number of times that completing the review questions to get a score of 100% was noted. Post-test scores the following 2 days after completing the lesson and the review, and then at least 1 week later a post-test was given. The questions that were missed were also noted, and students' comments and actions during review and post-test, including an evaluation questionnaire, were noted. The data analysis is mostly going to was quantitative due to the fact that most of the data was quantitative data. I did a comparative analysis of the pre and post-test scores on the CBA review lesson versus the paper and pencil review lesson. This allowed me to conclude results linked to instantaneous feedback versus delayed feedback. Also compared the amount of time and how many takes it took the student to achieve 100% during the review sessions to link effectiveness and efficiency of each method versus the other. I also compared student scores after longer periods of time to relate to content retention using each method. And lastly, I compared the questions missed over time in order to relate the scores to either random luck or actual content knowledge. The qualitative data that I analyzed was that I compared the students' comments during review to conclude student motivation, linked to the instantaneous feedback versus the delayed feedback. And I used the students' post-research feedback to relate the students' motivation to either method. The results and conclusions that I was able to make are that students prefer instantaneous feedback. The student was clearly more excited and motivated to complete the quizzes using instantaneous feedback through CBA rather than the delayed feedback through the paper and pencil. The student made 4 negative and no positive expressions when using the paper and pencil, including saying, "Do I have to do it again?" during a review, and visibly looking frustrated. The student even seemingly changed an answer on her third take of the cumulative quiz in order to stop taking it in order to earn the 100%. In addition, the student expressed that she preferred the CBA because when I answer the question, I get to see if it is right or wrong, that she noted in the post-assessment questionnaire. In contrast, the student excitedly told her scores after a CBA review and quickly started retaking it until scoring a 100% without complaint. She even did this on post-tests when retakes were not required. However, here, instantaneous feedback was not given on the post-test, so I'm not sure how much that would relate. Second conclusion from the results was that students master concepts faster with instantaneous feedback. The student mastered the concept, scoring 100% with instantaneous feedback in half the amount of time of the paper and pencil, 15 minutes versus 30 minutes on paper and pencil. The third result was that students retain content longer with instantaneous feedback. The student scored 100% after 3 weeks on the CBA unit, but only scored 90.9% on the paper and pencil unit after 1 week, which leads to this last result conclusion. Students retain content knowledge from cumulative assessments if mastery review activities with feedback are completed. You can see this in that the student learned on average 91.2% of the material that she did not know at the pretest. The mean content knowledge growth from the pretest was 132% more material after less than 2 hours of instructional time. Finally, the CBA saves time during review and post-test quizzes. It saves time. The mean cumulative quiz time for CBA quizzes was almost half the time of the paper and pencil quizzes, 3.17 minutes versus 6-minute average. For direct comparison, the student took the unvaried Unit 2 post-test with no feedback on paper and pencil on back-to-back days and averaged 8.5 minutes and 1 missed question. 5 days later, the student took the same Unit 2 post-test on computer-based and finished in 2 minutes, just missing 2 questions. So what are the implications for my classroom and all educators? I think it's pretty straightforward. Use computer-based assessment with instantaneous feedback as regularly as possible. Use it for review activities daily and especially for cumulative test prep. Stop worrying about students memorizing answers, since oftentimes the answers are the content that we're trying to teach them. Third, the time investment by the teacher to create these CBAs will be returned by less need for remedial teaching, since the students will be more motivated to remediate themselves when using the CBAs. Fourth, students have the opportunity to complete review activities wherever they are in the time that they have available from any internet-capable device. And the final implication is convert those paper and pencil activities to computer-based assessments with instantaneous feedback. Thank you for listening. It's been my pleasure. Any questions that you have, please reach out to me.